Hello everyone. My name is DeeGee Lester and I want to welcome you to First Chapter Friday at the Lewis County Public Library. I worked for 20 years as Director of Education at the Parthenon in Nashville, and I loved my job. I just retired a couple of years ago. But for several years I've been working on a children's book. I had done previous books and articles about Theodore Roosevelt, President Theodore Roosevelt. But this was my first children's book I did. When I started working on it, I recalled that as a child, Teddy Roosevelt was my favorite president. All the presidents seem a little boring to me, but growing up, I loved TR because he had been a cowboy. And to me, that was the greatest thing that you could do. And so all my life, I love Theodore Roosevelt. I've been a member of the Theodore Roosevelt Association for many years. But TR had a number of children. He had 6 children, 2 girls and 4 boys. The youngest boy was Quentin Roosevelt. And Quentin was the most like TR of all the kids. But he had a group of 7 little boys that he ran around with all the time when they lived at the White House. And his father started calling the kids the White House Gang. And Teddy gave the kids the attic of the White House as their headquarters. And these little boys got into everything. And so it took a number of years to do all the research and about the kids. I had a book about the gang that had been done in 1929 by one of the gang members, but it was a great big thick book. And I wanted to concentrate on only the last year they were together, because that's when I thought they would have their best adventures because they were older. So I had to find out when things happened, what years, to see what I could include and what I could not include. Everyone in the book is real except one guy who's not mentioned today. He was a Russian called Old Sam. And so he's the only completely fictitious person in the book. Everybody else is real. The conversations, portions of the conversations in some of the scenes are real, taken from the previous book. They've been highlighted in there. So of course I had to tell at the end of the book which quotes were coming from the Earl Looker book. But most of the conversations were made up, going along with the scene and with what little boys would have been talking about and all of that. So it's considered historic fiction because it's based on real events, but the conversations and things like that, which we do not know, were all made up. So it's listed as historic fiction. Today I'm going to read the first chapter to introduce you, because you have to know the 7 little boys, and they're all introduced in the first chapter. So today I'm going to read the first chapter of the book, Quentin Roosevelt's White House Gang, which you can get now on Amazon. Because of COVID, I do not know when it will actually move into bookstores, but you can, your parents, the adults and the teachers can order it on Amazon.com. Chapter 1, recalling that they live in that Quentin lives in the White House, is called The Greatest Place to Play. Quentin's laughing fit was pure torture. He bent double and held his aching sides in a spell of hysterical but silent laughter. His lungs unable to breathe either in or out. Someone on the floor above wanted the elevator. For the past 5 minutes, 9-year-old Quentin had been locked in a battle for its possession, each push of the button canceling the machine's previous order. The fellow overhead pushed the button, and the elevator again started to close. Leaning helplessly against the dark wood paneling of the elevator, Quentin managed a grateful gulp of air. His finger hit the button. The elevator rattled to a halt and reopened, setting off a second round of giggles as 3 of Quentin's friends scurried, pushing and shoving to join him inside. "Quentin Roosevelt!" a voice roared from the floor above, biting off each word with a snap of the famous teeth. This is the President of the United States. I order you to release the button immediately. Sounds of boyish laughter froze in the air as Quentin and his pals looked upward in shock. Golly, his father, Quentin gasped. Releasing the button, Quentin and his friends ducked from the elevator. They watched quietly as the cage door rattled shut. Then, with the clank and the whirring of machinery, the elevator rose to meet Quentin's father, President Theodore Roosevelt. As the elevator rumbled out of sight, the boys backed around the corner into a wide hallway of the White House basement. "Aw, he's not mad," a voice behind them drawled. The boys jumped and spun around. "Gee whiz, Eddie," Quentin said, leaning against the wall. "You gave me a heart attack." Eddie Norris, a squat, grimy man who maintained the White House boiler room, stood grinning. Quentin let out a big breath. "Are you sure, Eddie?" he asked as the boys crowded around the workman. "Sure, I'm sure. He wouldn't have played along with you for so long if he was mad. I reckon he thought the big battle for the elevator had gone on long enough and time it was ending. He's a busy man, you know." The boys glanced back nervously toward the elevator. "Besides," Eddie said, "if he was really mad, he'd have just charged down the stairs beside the elevator and had you boys scattering like jackrabbits." Quentin chuckled nervously. "You know a lot about people, don't you, Eddie?" "I know that one," Eddie replied, jerking a dirty thumb upward in the direction of the presidential voice. "You don't think we're in trouble?" one of the boys asked. Quentin glanced at a skinny, pop-eyed friend whose fear of presidential anger made his eyes appear bigger than usual. "No, Eddie's right," Quentin said with a reassuring slap on the back. "Father was just playing with us." The boys quietly followed Eddie into a large boiler room beneath the north entrance of the White House. In the center of the room stood the steam boiler, surrounded by the enormous hot water boiler that heated the mansion. Off to the left was a small circular high-pressure steam boiler. From these machines ran a cluster of pipes that led to the mansion's network of heating ducts. The hissing and clanking and heat in this area of the White House made Mrs. Roosevelt nervous. "It sounds as if it's going to blow any moment," and she refused to enter into that part of the mansion. Now the boys accompanied Eddie as he checked the gauges of the huge machinery. Quentin looked up at the massive pipes and shivered. He was excited by the feeling of energy in the room, but he was, like his mother, a little anxious about the monstrous boilers. He quickly shrugged off the worries and as he watched Eddie's calm demeanor. "This reminds me of a ship's boiler room," Quentin said as Eddie squinted at the gauge and stepped back, nodding in approval. "I suppose so," Eddie muttered. "It is like a ship, you know," Quentin exclaimed. "The ship of state. And Father's the captain, and we're the crew, and you're in charge of the boiler room. If the ship's boiler room blows, the whole ship is doomed," a freckled boy said dramatically. "That makes you the second most important man on the ship of state," Quentin informed Eddie. "Doesn't that make you feel awfully powerful?" Eddie Norris chuckled and wiped his hands on a filthy rag. "Yeah, I reckon I'm a pretty powerful man when you put it that way." Just then, 3 more boys skidded noisily into the doorway. "Sorry we're late, Quint," the largest boy said. 3 additional crewmen reporting for duty, sir," Quentin shouted, snapping to attention as his 6 friends fell into a military line beside him. Eddie faced his rigid saluting troops and returned an amused, half-hearted salute of his own. Pretending to inspect his crewmen, he ordered, "Your names, men." "Quentin Roosevelt, sir," the sandy-haired boy shouted, taking a giant step out and back into line. Eddie ran his hand over his mouth to stifle a smile as he looked at the boy. Like his father, Theodore, the youngest of the Roosevelt children was prone to pose on occasion, standing erect, chest out, chin out, eyes focused steadfastly on the future. He could also mimic his father's movements, treading hard and fast against the floor, smacking the back of his right hand into his open left, or clutching the air in a fist just to emphasize a point. Little TR, Eddie thought, and snapped back to the viewing of the troops. And what shall I call you, Seaman Roosevelt? Eddie asked politely, playing along with the game. Quint, sir. A tall, dark, handsome boy stepped forward. Charles Taft, sir. You may call me Taffy. In contrast to his father, Secretary of War William Howard Taft, whose 5-foot 11-inch frame supported over 300 pounds, Charlie was slim and active, and Eddie always thought of Taffy as older than his companions. And you, the workman said, moving down the line. Earl Looker, sir. The boy's big eyes gave him, as always, a serious, fearful appearance, as if his participation in each game or prank was with reluctance. They call me Look. A tow-headed boy stepped forward. Bromley Seeley, sir. Call me Brom. Eddie moved closer and searched the boy's face as Brom burst into loud laughter that echoed around the room. You're trying to find my eyebrows, aren't you? Don't worry, I've got some, see? He moved his head around in the light and pointed to the nearly invisible blonde hairs above his eyes. Eddie shook his head and moved on. And you? You've got a world of freckles. Richard Chew, sir, the boy said, grinning. They call me Sailor. Two small, skinny boys brought up the end of the line. Walker White, sir, volunteered the smallest of the group. He had a perfectly round head and hair cut as close as possible to the scalp. Even while standing at rigid attention, he seemed active and energetic. They call me Walker. And Edward Stead, sir, said a small, wiry boy. The guys call me Slats. That's because my last name reminds them of a bedstead. Brom broke again into loud laughs that bounced around the basement walls and metal pipes. His laughter halted abruptly as Eddie shouted, Attention! The boys snapped into smart soldierly form, faces firmly set and unblinking eyes staring straight ahead. Perfect discipline, Quentin whispered, savoring each syllable of a favorite word. Very good, men, Eddie said. As reward, there's a box of old tools beneath the table beside the door. I'm giving these tools to you men to take up to the ship's bridge for any repair work you need up there. You can keep these tools in your headquarters. Discipline was forgotten. Amid whoops, and the line fell into disarray as the boys gathered around Eddie. Golly, thanks, Eddie. We sure can use those tools. Thanks, Eddie. You're a pal. Eddie waved a muscular arm and shook his head in amusement as the noisy troops collected the tools and scattered from the room, heading for their gang headquarters in the White House attic. The gang crowded aboard the elevator and rumbled slowly up past the main floor and its grand east and its famous red, blue, and green rooms, and up another floor to the family's living quarters. As the elevator banged to a halt, the boys clattered and charged up the adjacent stairs to the attic. The boys gathered at the doorway, hurrying quickly into the attic's vast, musty darkness and slamming the door behind. I can't see, Slash said loudly. Well, let me find the switch, Quentin replied. His chilled fingers eased over the rough wooden beams. There was a trick to trying to locate the frayed switch and flicking it on without getting a shock. And Quint counted his fingers as they walked each step toward the switch. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hurry! Look whispered. I'm trying. Somebody else is up here, Sailor whispered. I can hear them breathing. Ooh! Shut up! Ouch! Quentin felt a little charge of electricity as he hit the switch. You guys goofing off almost got me electrocuted. A dull yellowish glow lit up the center portion of the long, cavernous attic. The gang had long ago dubbed the attic the greatest place to play, and they spent countless hours exploring its many nooks and crannies, crawling along the mansion's support beams, and swiping at its many cobwebs. Some portions of the attic could only be lighted by the aid of the gang's flashlights, but certain corners, Quentin had always insisted, were too sacred for even the glow of flashlights, and so these remained in constant darkness, a source of delightful terror for the youngsters. The spirit of Abraham Lincoln is said to roam these walls, Quentin enjoyed reminding his pals, and old Abe himself may be lurking in one of those black corners watching us. The very thought of sharing their attic headquarters with old Abe thrilled the gang, although none of them had ever seen the ghost of the Civil War president that was said to haunt the mansion. The boys especially liked to explore for treasure among the attic's many boxes and cedar chests. Sailor Chew had reported a rumor that Union gold from the Civil War was hidden in the White House attic. With the creaky opening of each mothball-reeking chest, the boys were certain they would discover the hidden gold or some other historical object that would bring wealth and fame to the White House gang. "I really did hear something," Sailor said again, whispering as the boys roamed among the chests and their new tools. "I did too," Walker said. From a dark corner came a creaking floorboard and a familiar voice. "I've been waiting for you." "It's TR!" Gang members squealed and scattered as President Theodore Roosevelt stepped out of the shadows. Tossing his frock coat over a nearby trunk, the president scrambled through the attic in hot pursuit of the squealing boys. Around boxes and chests and support posts they clambered. Just as the president reached for one boy, Luke slipped his fingers into the frayed switch and doused the lights, throwing the whole attic into darkness. A cheer rose from the gang, silenced suddenly by a heavy thud. "Turn on the lights! Turn on the lights!" everyone shouted. Luke nervously fumbled with the tricky switch. When the lights came on, the boys gasped in horror. The president leaned against a thick post, holding his head, while only inches to the left, at eye level, a huge nail protruded from the post. Quentin stared at his father. The sight almost made him sick. President Roosevelt looked at the stunned boys. "I'm all right, I'm all right. When one block of wood meets another, there's sure to be a headache," he said, chuckling. "We must remember to be more careful with our roughhousing and never, never turn out the lights when we're running around these posts." The boys just stared. Now, TR said, "no damage. We'll remember this lesson and not mention it to your mother." After much apologizing and forgiving, the president gathered his coat and headed downstairs to bathe the bruise on his forehead. The boys turned on Luke and charges fell nonstop. That was a stupid, thoughtless thing to do. Suppose he had lost an eye. You should be punished for that. Quentin stunned all with his steely remark. "You will go down in history as an assassin." "I didn't kill him," Luke wailed. "Only the attempt is necessary," Taffy informed them. Luke's eyes widened in horror as he faced the group of friends now encircling him. Suddenly, they grabbed him and shoved him into a huge trunk, slamming the lid. At first, he laid quietly in the darkness of the trunk, accepting the punishment for his crime. But within seconds, fumes from some mothballs began stinging his eyes and nose. Luke panicked and began screaming and kicking to get out. Thinking that the friend was only reacting to the dark, the boys climbed on top of the trunk, laughing and talking and banging their heels against its sides, pretending not to hear. The kicking suddenly stopped as the boys looked up and saw President Roosevelt standing in the doorway. "Where's Luke?" he asked, and headed straight toward the muffled cries as the boys, one by one, slid silently from the chest. The president swung open the lid and quickly handed a white handkerchief to the terrified, tearful boy. "See here, the mothballs have caused his eyes to water." The boys gathered around the trunk, exchanging knowing glances, understanding the president's actions and words were kind attempts to save the tearful boy's pride among his pals. "A new gang rule," the president announced as he rose and helped Luke step out of the trunk. "Henceforth, we will value our special friendships and show respect for one another, and that includes refraining from ganging up on one another. Henceforth, no boy shall ever be shut up in a cabinet or trunk." "Henceforth," the boys repeated solemnly. "Henceforth and forevermore," Quentin repeated, adding, "By Buzzard," and thus making it a sacred gang oath. As was the gang's habit with sacred oaths, the boys trooped downstairs to the gleaming entrance of the White House. There, the shiny marble floor was inlaid with the brass seal of the President of the United States, bearing the American eagle. Since the earliest days of the gang, dating back to second grade, the boys dubbed the seal the Buzzard Stone. Now, one by one, each member of the gang repeated the vow and kissed the sacred Buzzard Stone as he dangled headfirst over the eagle, his head held securely by two of his pals. And that is the main chapter, the first chapter, as an introduction to the White House gang. As we go through the chapters later today, I'm going to read two separate chapters. One has to do with the joy of reading, and the other one has to do with the boys' attack upon the State War and Navy building. As I said, these little kids were all over Washington. At that time, they could ride their bikes around the city. Nowadays, a child living in the White House would never be allowed to go out without Secret Service and would be heavily guarded. But this TR's administration was from 1901. He became president 6 months after the assassination of President McKinley. TR had been vice president. So he became president. So he served as president from 1901 through a second term in 1908. And so the boys had a lot of leeway. They went to a public school and they rode their bikes all over town and got into a lot of adventures. TR was a member of the gang. He was included in a lot of their adventures. And one of my most difficult tasks as the author was to let the president participate in their activities and have fun with the boys, because he did. He made a lot of time for them. But also to have kids reading this book to understand that this is the President of the United States. He's not just out here playing around all the time. He's doing serious things. And several big events happen during the course of this book. But I look at those events from the way the boys would look at them, not the way adults would look at those events. So the book had a lot of wonderful challenges, but it was one of my favorite things that I have ever done. And a friend of mine now, who is a composer with the Brussels Philharmonic in Brussels, Belgium, and I are working together on turning this little book into a musical production. It will take a number of years to do that, but we have already started working on it, and it's very exciting. We're both very excited. My partner who's working with me on this, the composer, has written for symphonies and operas and all of those sorts of things. And so he has a new challenge with a musical based on a children's book. So we're going to have a lot of fun. We hope you will join us again this afternoon for the readings with the 1 o'clock reading and then the 3 o'clock reading. I want to thank you for watching the first chapter Friday. Please tune in next week for the next episode in another series of books. As always, like and comment and share this video. You can follow the library's Facebook page or subscribe to their YouTube channel for more videos. Thank you again and have a great weekend. Thank you. I enjoyed being with y'all.